Welcome to Sunshine Cathedral's Queer God Squad. It's Wednesday, September the 11th, 2024. I'm Reverend Dr. Darrell Watkins, the senior minister here at Sunshine Cathedral.
I am Reverend Dr. Robert Griffin, the executive minister. Faith and religion can be complicated for the LGBTQ plus community. Surveys show that evangelical faith is the justification for the greatest attacks on the LGBTQ plus community.
I am Reverend Kevin Tisdall, the Minister of Education. The Queer God Squad is going to explore our religious community. Let's explore the big news of the day and what it means to you.
I'm Reverend Dr. Ann Atwell, the Minister of Connections. This is live, and then we are available on demand. If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Join the conversation on your favorite streaming platform and social media.
At Sunshine Cathedral, we're here to tell you that you are God's miracle, not God's mistake.
This is the Sunshine Cathedral perspective. LGBTQ Heroes of 9/11. It's been 23 years since planes rained down on New York City, Washington, D.C., and rural Pennsylvania. The U.S. was under attack by a terrorist organization that had hijacked planes and forced them to fly into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and crash land in a field on the way to harm another national treasure. The trade towers were destroyed and almost 3,000 people were killed that day. One of those 3,000 was Mychal Judge, a 68-year-old Roman Catholic priest who was an FDNY chaplain. He was one of the first on the scene that day. He was killed while administering the last rites to someone in the rubble. Judge is often called victim number one. Father Mychal was gay, and in 1989 started one of the first Catholic AIDS ministries. Another hero was Mark Bingham, a gay man on United Airlines Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania rather than hitting its intended target because Bingham and other passengers on the flight physically confronted the hijackers. There are others who weren't involved in heroics, but who deserved to live past that day and did not, like Ronald Gambo and Dan Brandhorst, a couple for 14 years with a 3-year-old son. They were killed by the New York City attack. Carol Flyzik kissed her partner of 13 years, Nancy Walsh, goodbye and got on a plane that was hijacked in flight. Nancy would never see Carol alive again. And Pamela Boyce, 43, who was in a 6.5-year relationship with Catherine Anello, had recently finished her associate's degree. She was a vice president of a firm at the World Trade Center way up on the 92nd floor. She never made it out of the World Trade Center that day. The Queer God Squad blesses the memories of our LGBTQ siblings lost on this day in 2001. I don't care how many years go by, I can just guess that none at this table will ever forget that day. I was working at New York City Transit that day. I was sitting in my office, and I remember for some reason I was monitoring the railroad, something I didn't do every day, but that day I had my radio on, and I heard a train operator at our Kings Highway train station tell the dispatcher that he just saw something fly into the World Trade Center. The dispatcher said, "Yeah, right, go on your way." And of course, it turns out that it was the beginning of an attack on the United States, really, a terrorist attack. And I didn't know Father Mychal, but I've heard stories about him over the years. And he was indeed a special man who took care of so many people, and the FDNY embraced him. They didn't care whether he was gay or not. He was just a beautiful person. And there are just so many personal stories that we can tell. My brother-in-law was a inspector for the fire department, and he was down in the hole, and since then has had so many different physical ailments. He just got over another bout of cancer and is still going for radiation. One of the people who worked for me, we did the inspections of New York City Transit facilities, and my guys were down there days after it, and one of them is still to this day fighting to get the care and coverage that he should deserve. That there were so many gay, lesbian, queer people in that 3,000 number is not surprising. And each one of their stories is a special story that is near and dear to so many of us. That was a terrible day. And I've just got to do a plug for the first time I ever heard you preach, Darrell, was the Sunday after 9/11. And you know, there were so many pieces of that sermon that I will always remember. The one phrase that I will never let go of is that you got up there to a group of people who lived in the shadow of the World Trade Center and said, please understand this. When those towers went down, God was the first one to shed a tear. And I think that's what we need to remember, that the humanity that day wasn't lost.
Yeah.
Humanity that day probably brought more people together than ever before. It is a powerful reminder that it's a damn shame that it takes a tragedy to bring people together. And unfortunately, that didn't last that long.
Not very long. Yeah.
But again, that there were LGBTQ plus people, that there were queer people at the World Trade Center, in the Pentagon, on the plane. Of course.
Yeah.
We are everywhere, and our love is everywhere. So God bless them, and God bless their memory.
Yeah.
I remember that day, I mean, obviously, like, where were you when this thing happened? You know,
Right,
when JFK
right.
was shot, or, you know, whatever. And I remember that day, just immediately, you can't be mentioned without just coming right to, we had that big, we called it a wheat bed because the posters had like wheat. It was just this huge, very comfortable thing. I didn't like to get out of it because it was so amazing. And the TV was right across, there was a TV across the room and a radiator. And we were watching CNN. It was just on. We weren't watching for any particular reason. And we just watched in Lifetime this plane fly into a building. And we're like, oh my God, how can that happen? What kind of an accident is that? You know, what we were wrong, blah, blah. And so we were just talking about it, and before too long, here comes another one. And we said, like, at once, we're under attack.
Yeah.
Like, the first one was a crazy accident, but a second time we're like, we need a plan, we need something. And then of course throughout the day, the phone is ringing because at that time we lived an hour from DC and 4 hours from New York and about 30 minutes from where the plane crash landed in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We were in Hagerstown, Maryland, and which is where Maryland and West Virginia and Pennsylvania all come together. And it's a suburb really of DC. And in fact, the bedroom communities where people who work in DC go all the way into West Virginia. The suburbs stretch far from DC. And so we were in the middle of all of that. And then, yes, the Sunday then that follows, I'm preaching in Piscataway, New Jersey, which is a suburb of New York City.
Right.
And so, yeah, so people who had left New York to live in New Jersey, or lived in New Jersey and worked in New York. So, yeah, so just everywhere, we had some connection to everything that day. And so, yeah, it's just in my mind. Now, I had a friend who lived in Brooklyn, and she crossed over the Brooklyn Bridge every day to go to work. She worked in Manhattan. And she was walking over the bridge when it happened, and she saw it happen.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
She like witnessed, and she thought, okay, well, the world's ending. Certainly, New York City's ending, and so she ducked into a McDonald's. She said, "I am not leaving this life hungry," and so she ducked into and got a sausage biscuit.
All right.
And she's alive today, but yeah, but she didn't know. She's like, okay, this is the end. I am not leaving this world hungry, and so she dumped into the first. It could have been a Dunkin' Donuts or anything. It just happened to be McDonald's.
Right.
She jumped right in and got something to eat. Which I think that is the best attitude.
God bless her, yeah.
Well, the world's ending. I got one more chance to get something.
Sausage biscuit.
I got one more chance to eat something.
I know somebody else who did that on a different day, but we won't talk about that
Oh my
today.
God.
That's another story.
But I want to tell
I
you
did it in a
that
different scenario. Same thing, yeah.
that walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, our chief was in a meeting at 2 Broadway, which is up the block from the World Trade Center, and he had to get back to our command center because we had to literally shut down the whole New York City transit system. And it took a number of hours. shut it down. Everybody was safe. There's a picture of a beam going through one of the train stations. Had we not shut the railroad down, that could have been a calamity underground. But the reason I remember him talking about walking across the bridge is because he was covered from head to toe with ash. And that ash was not just the building burning, that was people. And there are just so many different stories that we can tell about that day that are just devastating.
Yeah.
When it happened, my sisters, a lot of my family worked in the federal government in Washington, D.C. And my sister tells a story that after what happened at the Pentagon, you know, everything is going off and shut down. And like they all started out of the building and then they told them to go back into the building. And she was recanting that day about trying to get home from downtown D.C. out to Maryland where she lived in PG County. And she said the subways were shutting down. And people was actually carpooling with each other. They didn't care. They didn't care if you knew each other. If you were just going in that direction, you asked, "Are you going this way?" And people just jump in each other's cars. They didn't care. It's like everybody was one that day.
Yeah, they were.
And the unity was trying to get everybody to some point of safety. And so my sister was able to get a ride out as far as, if you know, there to Greenbelt area and to the subway. And her husband came and picked her up from there. And my other sister was going the other direction. So basically it was the same thing out the. So everybody was trying to get somewhere out of DC that day. And so I think that is a reminder of the importance of how close a lot of us were connected to those events. And about how a lot of us had LGBTQ people who were connected to that event. And these are not lost heroes on either side of any of us. And so, you know, the church that was in Hagerstown, Maryland, he was in Piscataway. So even the churches, the LGBTQ churches have been ministering to people who knew people from our communities about this.
And I remember the Broadway community doing these commercials on TV, like come to New York, you know, come vacation, like don't let the city die for this, you know, step up. And of course, it's an old joke about, you know, Broadway being, you know, for Jews and gays, but for real, a lot of those Jews and gays stood up and said, "Let's save the city. Come see a show." They would perform in the street. I remember the subways filled up pretty soon. There was all this scaring about, you know, oh, better not get on the subway. What if somebody came in the subway, you'd be stuck? And it was almost like, I bet 8/10 of us just said, screw them, we're taking the subway. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're like, I'm not gonna walk 18,000 blocks because something might happen, you know, screw them. And we just, like, there was this real defiant, not only unifying, but defiant, and we're gonna be okay, and we're gonna take care of each other, and of course all the funerals. It's not lost on me though, that of all the people named, one person I want to name is Franklin Graham, who immediately did not waste any time saying that people who had died, if they weren't part of his religion, they were in hell that moment. He took one of the scariest, saddest moment, and instead of offering care and concern and compassion, immediately started proselytizing and condemning, and just what a vile human I believe he is. But anyway, but the other people named, like Mark Bingham and Father Mychal Judge, that these were queer people. That the first person that we know to be taken out was administering sacraments in rubble.
A queer Catholic priest.
Yeah.
Right.
In the rubble where all the stuff had just fallen, and you know stuff wasn't done falling, and you know that you didn't even know what was next, and probably the air he breathed, he would have been 91 now, but the air he breathed would have kept him from reaching 91 because of the pollution. And but that was the first one, just trying to minister to one person. All these people are, you know, it's like you can do one at a time. And then the person who physically, he was an athlete, but the person who physically confronted hijackers that made the plane crash was a gay guy. And apparently people who knew him said, well, of course he did. He would have been asleep or passed out or tied up or something if he hadn't done that. Of course that's what he did. And so that the heroes of 9/11, the ones who come to mind, the ones who we have names for, guess what, y'all? LGBTQ.
Queer. Right, I also want to bring up, yes, we read these names and bless them. God bless them all. And there were a lot of queer people who were hands-on, who were, I remember actually here at Sunshine Cathedral. We had moved into this building maybe 6 or 7 months before.
Months. Yeah.
We were scheduled to dedicate Sunshine Cathedral the Sunday after 9/11, and it was postponed.
Sure.
But the church was opened because of the likes of Franklin Graham and the others who said, you know, all these horrid, awful things. It was our queer community. It was our folks who came together and said, come here, be here, pray. There will be people here to talk to, people who will support you. The people in the planes and in the crashes, God bless them. And there were a lot of people too, lending a hand,
Wherever they
saying,
could.
you know what?
Giving money to
We're
the Red
here.
Cross, just whatever they could.
Exactly. Stepping up and doing the hard work.
And you walk through the sanctuary at Sunshine Cathedral and just listen to what people are saying. You hear a lot of New Jersey, New York, New England.
It was devastating.
We're way down here, but our friends and families and previous lives are often from the Northeast. So people are very personally, these queer people were very personally involved and touched. And I just want to tell you, speaking of people who were very touched and very involved, when Reverend Kevin was talking about we this and the transit that, he was like the number 2 person in the entire New York City Transit Authority. And so when he's talking about the trains and whatever, he was there. He was on call. He was on duty.
Number 2 person in my division.
In his division. I don't remember. And once he caught a fish this big, but but no, he was very involved in all that. In fact, I don't even remember when you got home that night. I don't think it was the normal, which is always late time anyway.
Another story. My husband Mychal was at a family funeral that I was supposed to be joining him at, but I couldn't, of course, because stuff went down. And he's trying to figure out how to get home to our grandson who was at school in New Jersey. We had to call a friend to have her pick him up. And I had to guide Mychal out of New York City because it was only one way to get out by then. And that was the Verrazano Bridge. Thank goodness it was the Verrazano Bridge because it took him in the direction we had to go. But that was just a crazy day. And the other thing, I talked about my train radio. Another manager came in and she didn't have her radio, so she grabbed mine, and she was a sister. She was a lesbian. So we were legion in the New York City Transit too. What a day.
So when there's a hurricane, when there's a tornado, when there's an earthquake, when there's a terrorist attack, when there's when there is some sort of viral plague, whatever, and it impacts everyone's concerned. Just remember, a significant percentage of those people are going to be queer.
Yes.
And often those are the people that you will see stepping up. We've had to learn to be brave. We've had to learn to take care of each other. We've had to learn how to survive hard times or whatever. And so it isn't surprising to me that we are often the cream that rises to the top in those moments.
Amen.
Well, that's today with the Queer God Squad. We want to thank you for joining us. We are here daily at 3 p.m. to have some fun and to discuss what our LGBTQ plus community is talking about.
Sunshine Cathedral is the world's largest progressive queer church. Progressive, queer, and God are words that naturally should go together. And we are all in this together. Remember that.
You are God's miracle, not God's mistake.
Until next time, we are the Queer God Squad. Goodbye.